John Raines had lived most of his life by a code of silence, discipline, and respect. As a former tomb guard of the unknown soldier, he understood what true honor meant. Every step he once took guarding that sacred ground was measured, perfect, and filled with purpose. The world around him could change, but to John, loyalty never faded. That's why, even years after his retirement, he kept a promise deep in his heart, one he intended to keep no matter what stood in his way. His best friend, Commander Mark Davis, had been a Navy SEAL, the kind of man who laughed loud but fought even harder. They had met on a joint ceremonial event years ago. Though they came from different branches of service, the bond between them grew quickly. Mark would often tease John, saying, "You guards are too serious, man. You'd probably salute the sun if it rose late." John would just smile and reply, "At least the sun knows its duty." That bond carried them through good times and dark ones. Mark went on missions that no one was allowed to talk about. He'd send John short messages every few months, just a few lines to say he was alive. Then one day the messages stopped. John waited, then hoped, and finally feared the truth. Weeks later, an official letter arrived. Commander Mark Davis had died during an operation overseas. His body couldn't be recovered. John sat in silence that night, the folded flag resting on his lap, and whispered, "You're not forgotten, brother. I'll bring you home." Years passed, and John kept that promise close. One day, Mark's sister contacted him. She had finally received a small urn containing some of Mark's recovered ashes. Her voice trembled as she said, "He wanted to rest near the tomb, John. You were the only one he trusted with that." John didn't hesitate. He packed his uniform, the one he hadn't worn in years, polished the buttons until they shone, and set out for Arlington. It was a quiet morning when John arrived at the cemetery. The air was crisp, the sound of footsteps on gravel echoing softly among the rows of white headstones. He carried the small urn close to his chest, wrapped in a folded flag. He wasn't there for ceremony or recognition. He just wanted to say goodbye the way a soldier should. At the entrance, a young official stopped him. The man looked at the uniform, the medals, and then the urn in John's hands. "Sir, do you have authorization for this?" he asked politely at first. John nodded and explained that the ashes belonged to a Navy SEAL and that he only wanted to place them near the memorial quietly. But the official frowned and said, "I'm sorry, sir. That's not allowed without prior approval. You'll have to leave." John thought he had misheard him. Leave? He looked around at the sacred ground he had once protected with his own life. He explained again who Mark was, what he had done, and how he had given everything for his country. The official's tone grew sharper. "Rules are rules, sir. Please step back from the gate." For a long moment, John stood there silently. His hand tightened around the urn and his throat felt dry. He wasn't angry, just deeply hurt. This wasn't about rules. It was about respect. Around him, a few visitors had stopped to watch. Some recognized the tomb guard badge on his uniform. Others whispered softly, unsure of what was happening. The official called for another staff member, and together they repeated the order. John realized there was no point in arguing. He nodded slowly, adjusted his posture, and said quietly, "Understood." He turned and began to walk away. Each step felt heavier than the last. He had stood guard through rain, snow, and storms, but this, being turned away while keeping a friend's final promise, felt like the hardest walk of all. A small boy standing with his father nearby watched him go and whispered, "Dad, why are they making the soldier leave?" The father didn't have an answer. He just looked down, ashamed of what he'd witnessed. John reached his car, placed the urn gently on the seat beside him, and sat in silence for a long time. He could hear the faint sound of a bugle in the distance, maybe from another funeral playing taps. The notes carried through the air, soft and haunting. John closed his eyes. "I'll find a way, Mark," he whispered. "You deserve better." As he started the car, he didn't notice that someone had filmed the entire scene. One of the visitors, a veteran himself, had recorded it on his phone. The uniformed tomb guard being turned away with a fallen SEAL's ashes. That video would soon spread far beyond the quiet grounds of Arlington, and what happened next would shake even the highest ranks of the military. But at that moment, John didn't care about cameras or public attention or rules. He only cared about one thing, the promise he made to a friend who never came home. He had been denied once, but deep down he knew this wasn't the end. The road to keeping that promise had just begun. As the sun began to set behind the endless rows of white stones, John looked back one last time at the cemetery gate. He lifted his hand in a slow, perfect salute, the kind only a tomb guard could give. It was his way of telling Mark, "I'm still here, and I won't stop until you are too." And with that he drove away, unaware that his quiet act of loyalty was about to capture the nation's heart and remind everyone that some promises are worth everything, even when the world forgets what honor truly means. The video appeared online late that night. It was short, only a minute long, but it captured something powerful. A retired tomb guard being stopped at Arlington National Cemetery while carrying the ashes of his fallen friend, a Navy SEAL. John Raines's quiet dignity, the way he held the small urn close, and the gentle but firm salute he gave as he walked away. All of it struck people in a deep way. Within hours, the video began circulating on social media and veteran forums. The headline read, "Tomb Guard Turned Away While Carrying SEAL's Ashes." Thousands of viewers watched it, shared it, and commented. Some expressed anger at the cemetery staff, calling their actions disrespectful. Others shared stories of their own friends or family members who had served and passed away, stories of loss and loyalty. The video wasn't just a clip anymore. It had become a symbol of respect, or rather the lack of it. Among those who saw the video was retired General Michael Harwood. He had served for decades in the military and had commanded multiple elite units, including SEAL teams. The video made him pause. He didn't react immediately with anger. Instead, he watched it carefully, noting John's posture, the precision in his movements, and the silent strength he displayed even in the face of being turned away. To General Harwood, this was not just a matter of rules. It was a matter of honor. Without hesitation, General Harwood reached out. He asked his aide to find John Raines and get his contact information. Within a few hours, he had called John directly. The phone rang in John's small apartment late at night. Surprised, he answered, and a strong, calm voice said, "John, this is General Harwood. I saw what happened at Arlington. I want you to know you are not alone. You will honor your friend properly, and I will make sure it happens." John was taken aback. It was not every day that a four-star general personally called a retired tomb guard. His voice caught in his throat as he whispered, "Sir, thank you." He could feel a mix of relief and hope. For the first time since being turned away, he believed the promise he made to Mark Davis might actually be fulfilled. The next morning, Arlington officials were contacted by the Department of Defense. Emails were sent, phone calls were made, and meetings began behind closed doors. Bureaucrats and staff who had enforced the rule suddenly found themselves answering questions from people much higher up the chain than usual. Policies were reviewed, emails from veterans flooded in, and even some of the staff expressed regret over what had happened. Meanwhile, the public reaction continued to grow. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting the loyalty of John Raines and the heroism of Commander Mark Davis. People everywhere were talking about it, sharing their own memories of friends and family who had served. Veteran organizations issued statements praising John's courage and the importance of honoring fallen soldiers. Even ordinary citizens, those with no military connection, were moved. Many said they had tears in their eyes as they watched the video and read about the story behind it. General Harwood, however, was not satisfied with just public acknowledgement. He wanted action. He personally coordinated with Arlington leadership to arrange a private ceremony, ensuring it would be conducted with full honor, respect, and military protocol. The urn containing Commander Davis's ashes would be brought in, John would carry it, and the flag he had carefully wrapped it in would be properly displayed. Over the next few days, John prepared for the ceremony. He polished his uniform meticulously, just as he had done for every guard shift in the past. He practiced his posture and movements in front of a mirror, making sure everything was perfect. But this time it was different. This time it wasn't just about tradition. It was about keeping a promise. It was about giving his friend the dignity he deserved. John also reflected on how quickly the world could respond when people saw an injustice. The video had been recorded by a stranger who didn't know him, didn't know Mark Davis, yet their actions had set a chain of events in motion. The power of simple truth and loyalty was clear. Sometimes even a small act, quietly observed, could change everything. When the day of the ceremony arrived, it was quiet but solemn. John arrived early, carrying the small urn, dressed in his uniform and walking with the careful precision that only a former tomb guard could display. Soldiers lined the pathway, standing at attention, while Arlington's staff watched respectfully. General Harwood was there too, standing with a calm authority that reassured everyone that today would be different. Before the ceremony began, John looked at the urn in his hands. The weight felt heavier than it should have, but it was not a burden. It was a responsibility. He remembered the times he and Mark had laughed, trained, and shared moments that only soldiers could truly understand. He whispered softly, "I've got you, brother. You're coming home." The ceremony itself was brief yet profound. John carried the ashes to a carefully chosen place near the tomb of the unknown soldier. A bugler played taps as he knelt, then stood tall and saluted. General Harwood handed him the folded flag and said words that would stay with John forever. No man who guarded the tomb should ever be turned away from honoring a friend who gave everything. Today, you have done right by him and by all of us. As John saluted, a wave of emotion swept over him. Tears filled his eyes, but his posture remained steady. Around him, soldiers and visitors alike felt the weight of the moment. This was more than a ceremony. It was a reminder of what honor, loyalty, and friendship truly meant. Afterward, the story was reported widely in newspapers and online. Arlington officials issued an official apology, and new guidelines were introduced to ensure that veterans could honor their friends without bureaucratic barriers. The nation, for a brief moment, paused to reflect on the sacrifices made by men and women who served and the bonds that never fade. John returned home that evening, exhausted but fulfilled. The video that had started it all now served as a lasting symbol of courage, loyalty, and the power of doing the right thing. He knew the promise he had made to Mark Davis was finally honored. He also realized that sometimes, even when the world seems unfair, standing firm and acting with integrity could inspire change far beyond what one person might imagine. And so, John Raines, the retired tomb guard, waited quietly for the next chapter, knowing that the final part of this story, the true resolution, was still to come. The day finally arrived. John Raines woke early, feeling a mix of nervousness and calm determination. He dressed carefully in his tomb guard uniform, the same one he had worn decades ago, polished to perfection. Every detail mattered. Every crease, every button, every medal was in its rightful place. Today was not just another day. Today he would finally honor his friend, Commander Mark Davis, the way he had promised years ago. When he arrived at Arlington National Cemetery, the air was crisp and still. The rows of white headstones stretched endlessly in all directions, a quiet reminder of sacrifice, courage, and duty. Soldiers lined the paths, standing at attention, their faces serious yet respectful. Some had served alongside John in the past, while others were younger, learning the weight of responsibility that came with guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier. At the center of it all stood General Michael Harwood. His presence was reassuring, commanding, and quiet all at once. He approached John as he arrived, shaking his hand firmly and looking him in the eyes. "Today, John, you will do what should have been done months ago," the general said. His voice carried the calm authority of a man who had seen countless ceremonies, but none quite like this one. John held the small urn close to his chest. The ashes of his best friend were finally going to rest where they belonged. He remembered the moments he and Mark had shared, laughing during training exercises, strategizing missions, and even the quiet times just talking about life and family. Mark had always been fearless, and now through John he would rest among heroes. The ceremony began quietly. John walked slowly toward the designated spot near the tomb, each step precise, deliberate. The soldiers on either side remained perfectly still, the sound of boots on gravel echoing softly. Visitors watched in silence, some capturing the moment on cameras, others simply letting the gravity of the event sink in. When John reached the spot, he knelt for a moment, placing the urn gently on a small pedestal prepared for the ceremony. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, not as a burden but as a responsibility he had carried for years. He straightened, looked at the urn, and whispered softly, "You're home now, brother. I've kept my promise." A bugler played taps, the soft, haunting notes filling the air. The sound carried across the cemetery, touching the hearts of everyone present. John stood at attention, saluting with precise movements he had practiced countless times as a tomb guard. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. This was not just a ceremony. It was a culmination of years of loyalty, grief, and quiet determination. General Harwood stepped forward, handing John the folded American flag. "This is for your friend," the general said. "For all who serve and all who gave everything. Today you honor not only him but the values we all stand for." John accepted the flag, his hands steady despite the emotions rising inside him. He could feel the weight of Mark's sacrifice and the honor of his own duty, both converging in that single moment. As John saluted, a hush fell over the crowd. The ceremony, though brief, was deeply moving. Soldiers, visitors, and staff alike felt the power of loyalty and respect. This was more than a ritual. It was a lesson in humanity, courage, and friendship. John's quiet dedication had reminded everyone present that honor was not just about rules. It was about heart. After the ceremony, General Harwood addressed the small gathering. "This nation's strength is measured not only by the battles we win, but by the respect we show for those who gave everything," he said. John Rains has reminded us that true service does not end with retirement, and loyalty does not fade with time. Today we honor a fallen hero, and we honor a man who kept a promise. The crowd remained silent for a moment, letting the words sink in. Then quietly visitors approached John, thanking him, shaking his hand and expressing their respect. Veterans placed their hands on his shoulder, acknowledging the courage it took to stand firm in the face of denial and bureaucracy. Ordinary citizens, some with tears in their eyes, thanked him for showing what loyalty and honor truly meant. News crews covered the event, telling the story across television, newspapers, and social media. The video that had once shown John being turned away now captured the ceremony in all its dignity. People across the country watched as the retired tomb guard fulfilled a promise that should never have been denied. Veterans groups praised the act, calling it a reminder that no matter how small or quiet an act of loyalty may seem, it can inspire millions. Arlington National Cemetery also issued a formal apology for the earlier incident. New guidelines were introduced to ensure that veterans and those carrying the remains of fallen comrades could be honored without unnecessary obstacles. John's actions, combined with General Harwood's support, had led to lasting change, an enduring reminder that respect for service should never be compromised. That evening, John returned home. The small urn had been respectfully placed in its final resting place near the tomb, and Commander Mark Davis was finally at peace. John sat quietly in his living room, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the video, the general's call, the ceremony, and the countless hands that had helped ensure this honor. Most of all, he thought about Mark. He whispered once more, "We did it, brother. You're home." A sense of calm washed over him, mixed with pride and relief. The promise he had made years ago had been fulfilled. It was a promise of loyalty, courage, and honor, the kind of promise that lasts a lifetime. John knew that the story would live on, not just as news or social media posts, but as a lesson for generations to come. It was a story about friendship, sacrifice, and the power of standing firm for what is right. More than that, it was a story about the strength of the human spirit, the quiet courage that does not seek recognition, but leaves a mark that the world cannot ignore. And as the night settled over Arlington, John Rains allowed himself a rare smile. The tomb guard who had once been turned away had now returned as the keeper of a promise kept. Mark Davis, the SEAL who had given everything, was finally at rest. Their bond, forged through life and death, had endured, proving that true honor never fades and true friendship never dies.